So last weekend, something happened called the Nihongo Fiesta, which is pretty much a Japanese arts festival, and they had screenings of certain movies, a handful of movies, but they dedicated one entire day to showing this, so I figured, hey, let's talk about it. So Howl's Moving Castle is written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki, and it's actually based on a book by Diana Wynne Jones, which is surprising to me. Now, Howl's Moving Castle is about this girl named Sophie, and she's pretty much, I wouldn't know how to describe her really. She's very plain, she's very bored with her life, kind of. And one day she gets cursed by the Witch of the Waste, and she turns into like this 90-year-old woman, pretty much. And she kind of ventures out, and she begins to actually kind of like her old form, I think. And she ends up in this castle, this giant mechanical castle of this really powerful wizard called Howl, and spending time with Howl and the rest of these, really quirky characters, she discovers that there's this war going on behind everything, and just kind of has to find a way to thrive, pretty much. I actually find it really difficult to talk about Howl's Moving Castle because it is really, really weird, but in such a good way. Like, this movie is like such a treat for the imagination. First of all, I want to touch on Miyazaki animation because it has remained very consistent, and it really looks the same since like the beginning. And this is, I think, only my second Miyazaki film. I'm sorry. I saw Spirited Away like way back. I don't even remember it. So Howl's Moving Castle is like officially in my mind the first Hayao Miyazaki movie that I've really paid attention to when watching. And what I like so much about his character models and stuff is that the human characters are very simple and very elegant. The settings are also very simple and elegant. You have towns and harbors and stuff. But then when you get to the fantastical elements, the creatures, it becomes almost freaky. Like, some of these characters scare me, really. It like that contrast is so nice, but for some reason those two things fit together so well. It really does make a Miyazaki movie very unpredictable. Like, you don't know what you're gonna see next, and when things start happening, you're just like, oh, what's happening? And you can really tell that Miyazaki is just having so much fun, just teasing your imagination. Now, in terms of setting, again, this movie is just like a feast for the imagination, the way it presents its setting, because I don't know the name of the place, but it really is like a world where magic just comes naturally, like magic realism, and I love that kind of stuff. I love how, wizards and witches in a world are just, a thing, and people just can't accept that. And I'm gonna be mentioning weirdness a lot during this review because this movie really is just weird, man, and that comes right now to the characters. The characters here are just like, where did these things come from? Really feels like came from this fantasy novel, which it did, I guess. Of course, you got Sophie, who I guess is the most normal person here, and she becomes a 90-year-old woman, and that in itself is pretty weird. Like, the fact she kind of shifts between young and old. It's just weird. And then you have Howl, the wizard, who's like this really pretty boy, but at the same time he's very insecure about that, and he's pretty much a lazy slob. He's just doing all this magic for himself, but he is very, very powerful. You've got a scarecrow with a turnip head named Turnip Head, who just kind of bounces around and stuff. You've got this little boy named Markle who puts on a hood, turns into an old man all of a sudden, and you have my favorite character, and I think a lot of people's favorite character, definitely Calcifer, who is just a ball of fire, literally. And what's so cool about this dedication to being so weird is that at a certain point, someone mentions it in the movie, but then you realize it too. It's like everyone being under the same roof, all these different weird zany characters, you start to feel like they're a family, and that's really heartwarming, kind of, because they're all so different, but at the same time they just kind of do work together really well. Now it brings me to the voice acting. Now, unfortunately, I was not able to watch this movie in its original Japanese dubbing. Like, I could only watch it with the English subtitles. So, this is the one that has Christian Bale voicing Howl, and for one, it's really weird to hear Christian Bale voicing characters now because everyone knows him as Batman, and he never really does that gruff voice in this movie. And although it is kind of weird because everyone knows who Christian Bale is now, and it's weird to connect that face to Howl's face, he still does a good job, I think. I forgot to mention also that young Sophie is voiced by Emily Mortimer, old Sophie is voiced by Gene Simmons, and Gene Simmons does such a good job as this old woman because I don't know, she really feels so dedicated to it, just the way her voice trembles, the way she just does her phrasing. It's so effective as, coming across as this old fed up woman. However, this movie is proof that Billy Crystal can play anything and sound great and comedic. Like, he can play any anthropomorphic whatever, and this time he plays a ball of fire. And Calcifer is just such a fun character, and he's just all over the place, and he's so fun and whatever. And Billy Crystal really makes it his own. Like at certain points, to me, it doesn't sound like Mike Wazowski or Billy Crystal anymore. He really does try to inject heart into it, and he does. Again, the plot is very weird. It's very weird. Like you go everywhere here. You go into strange dimensions and weird landscapes. All of it is crafted so beautifully, and it is actually quite intriguing. This world they set up. The fact that wizards are kind of have to ally themselves with the state to help in the war and stuff, and Howl just doesn't want any of that. It's just such an interesting way to go about this whole magic thing, and what I like is when movies do not expose every single detail of how things work. Like because if you show us just a bit, we kind of are still able to suspend our disbelief, and really does make you feel like you're in a bigger world. So I really appreciate the fact that they didn't try to explain everything, and it's just you really did have to suspend your disbelief, but it really just is again feast for the imagination. It's just so fun to take in, just a marvel to watch. However, this movie is not perfect, definitely not. It's compared to Spirited Away, which I remember being really, really great. Howl's Moving Castle isn't quite as great. I mean, it still is great to me, but the ending of this movie is very, very rushed to me. It's pretty messy. Like, it just kind of, it just ends. I also have an issue with how certain relationships aren't, defined as well as I think they should have. Like, Howl and Sophie, like, all of a sudden, they have a thing, and it's like, why? And, when Sophie first comes into the house, like, no one's like, what is this girl doing here? She discovered her secret. It's just like, oh, yeah, come in. And it's, I always thought that Edno, like a ball of fire and this powerful wizard, would be a bit more defensive of the place they live in. I don't know, it just seemed a bit too weird. That's when it got a bit too weird because it was illogical. Other than that, though, Howl's Moving Castle is a great movie. It's just the kind of movie you can watch anytime because it's just so fun to watch. It's a great introduction, I think, to Miyazaki films because it's not super loaded with stuff. It's very light-hearted, but at the same time, you've got lots of great imagery in there. You've got really strange creatures, and again, the castle itself, I have to mention, looks great. It looks fantastic. The amount of detail that went into it, so good. Anyway, yeah, I decided to just make a review in the middle of all my Oscar stuff, just to give me a break. So, if you guys have seen Howl's Moving Castle, what do you think about it? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Whatever you think, please leave a comment below, and let's have a conversation.